So in 2008, when I was at the end of my first year in my third dream job and was completely miserable, I was at dinner with my mentor and my best friend at the time, and we were all talking about our lives and what was going on in them, and much sushi was had, and some sake was consumed as well. And it got to be my turn, and my mentor asked me, well, so how are you doing? How's the new job since the last time I've seen you? And I sort of hung my head and admitted that it was once again not the right fit. It was once again the thing that I thought was going to be my heart and my soul clicking, but ended up just being another tour of to-dos and obligations. And we were talking, and my mentor finally cut me off, and she said, Jennifer, stop. Close your eyes. And even this, I resisted. I didn't want to close my eyes. I said, no, I'm not going to close my eyes. She said, no, close your eyes. So I closed my eyes, and she told me to picture my perfect day, and asked me, okay, now what are you doing on your perfect day? What kind of work are you doing? And as soon as she asked me that, and I had my eyes actually closed, I knew immediately that the perfect work for me on my perfect day would be doing spiritual healing work. And my eyes flew open, and I was like, well, what the heck is that? What's a spiritual healer? There's no job called spiritual healer. I don't know what to do with that. What am I supposed to do? I don't want to be a psychologist, you know? And so I thought, and my friend and my mentor both sat with me, and I was like, well, I mean, I suppose I could be some sort of life coach or something. And they looked at me, silence. And then I was like, you know, maybe ministry? And my best friend went, yes. And my mentor said, say more about that, say more about that. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know. It seems like it might be a good idea, but I think I'd have to go to school for it. And, you know, if I'm in school, I'm going to be thinking all the time. I have to do all this coursework, and I don't want anybody to tell me what following the Spirit is about. I have to follow it in my own heart. And my best friend looked at me, and she was like, Jennifer, I'm pretty sure that in grad school you're in class for maybe a few hours a day, and then maybe reading for a few hours after that, and then after that I think you can spend the rest of the time following your heart. I was like, okay. And I said, but I don't even know, I don't know how I would do it. I mean, what sort of tradition would I follow? Like, how could I tell people what they're supposed to believe? And my mentor said, well, what tradition have you been practicing? And I said, Unitarian Universalism. They don't tell anybody what to believe. And as they were asking me these questions and I was reflecting, for some reason, I don't know whether it was the late hour or the aforementioned sake that had been consumed, but I saw myself placing obstacles in my own way. Like I was making up excuses to not listen to this little bird that was saying ministry in the back of my head. And so I didn't say yes to ministry. I just said, okay, for this moment, I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to stop placing things in my own way. And so I just got quiet and I stopped doing that. And as soon as I stopped making things up, which is what I had been doing, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders. It felt like something had been pushing me down, and all of a sudden, I started to float. And it became immediately obvious that my skill set exactly matched the description for minister. And I sort of felt light and fluttery, and I said, oh my God, no pun intended, I'm going to be a minister. And my mentor and my best friend, like, literally burst out clapping. And no one had ever said anything to me in in my life that I should be a minister, but apparently they had all been thinking it. And they said, we've been waiting for you to realize this. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that? But in that moment, that night, I knew exactly what I was supposed to be doing. It was one of those realizations that I had been reeling in like a fish for months that was all of a sudden crashing into my lap. And the next day, the very next day, I started preparing. I started looking on the internet and figuring out where I might go to school, and within a year and a half, I was in seminary at Stark King School for the Ministry. Revelation comes in many forms. Sometimes it comes in an embodied sense of knowing. Sometimes it comes as that sudden aha. Sometimes it comes as just like a twinkling hunch, something that you can feel in your belly or maybe at the back of your brain. It also brings very disparate content. Sometimes it's emotional, sometimes it's informational, sometimes it's something you've been longing for deeply, and sometimes it is something you absolutely do not want to hear. In the book Quantum Change, in which Professor William Miller interviews 55 people who've experienced life-changing realizations, he shares that although these realizations have both differing content and form, they all felt similar to the people who were reporting. The majority of the people reported that these realizations felt like a message revealed, rather than something they had thought of on their own. According to a recent article in Psychology Today, the field of cognitive neuroscience gives us some clues about what is happening in this message-revealed feeling. Several different studies have found that creative insight, or that aha moment of putting disparate information together and coming up with something new, happens in the back of the brain, in the stem. Brain scans show that the neocortex, which is the front of the brain, which is responsible for rational thought, goes quiet for a little bit, and that the back of the brain lights up. This back of the brain here is called the default mode network, and in that lighting up, it's sort of working out the problem. The back of the brain area uses almost 20 times the resources as the neocortex when you turn off your thinking brain and just relax. It also works more slowly. It's under your conscious mind, but it has more creative power than your conscious mind and your neocortex. So when it comes up with an answer, the answer gets pushed up from the back of the brain into the front of the brain and arrives fully formed in consciousness. So when we're looking at this process of problem solving, of looking and seeking truth, it actually makes sense to back off, to give your back brain a chance to wrestle with the problem, or as Naomi Shihab Nye wrote, give the brain an opportunity to reel that fish in for several months. A lot of creative people have default mode network time built into their process. Beethoven took a long walk every evening and carried a pencil and paper in his pocket with him. John Milton included several hours of preparation for writing each day, an hour of meditation, several hours of reading, 4 hours walking back and forth in his garden, and only 3 hours of actual writing every day. Charles Darwin took 3 walks per day and spent 2 hours lying awake in bed each night, solving problems. I know a number of my preacher friends who have built default mode network time into their writing time, myself included. My writing time always includes both writing time and walking away from the writing time so that the next idea can arrive. By admitting that writing is a creative process, by admitting that problem solving is a creative process, I'm able to allow my default mode network to engage and to solve problems and to come up with the next idea. So this does not, however, even though I am encouraging quiet time, I'm not encouraging being lazy or living in the veg out stage of default mode network, even though that's lovely. The back brain needs all the information that's necessary in order to come up with that aha moment. So in order for the back brain to do the work, to come up with a creative solution, it needs every single piece of the puzzle in order to come up with that. So your neocortex, your conscious brain, you have to gather all that information. So if you're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, that magical, fully formed solution is not going to arrive. So you have to combine the practice of daily work, of gathering information, with downtime, default mode network time, in order to come up with that combination that produces an aha. But this is a tricky balance, because how are you supposed to know if you have all the pieces yet if you haven't come up with the solution? How do you know if you've actually reached the mountaintop, the whole self fully formed, or whether you're just on a lovely plateau on the way up? So first of all, it's a daily practice. You have to actually build in some default mode network time in order to even see if you have a hunch in the first place. And I would say that creating this kind of time is countercultural. We've all inherited a Puritan work ethic that encourages a bootstrap mentality of going at every problem head on and working. Doing, 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 doing until it's done. And on top of that, in our modern age of endless entertainment and possibilities for distraction, even our downtime isn't really downtime. Instead of going into default mode network on the train, we check our smartphones. Instead of letting our mind wander in the car, we're bombarded with billboards and advertisements. Instead of just sitting at home and daydreaming, we're on the computer, watching television, posting on Facebook. I've never done any of that. With our smartphones in our hands and our audiobooks and podcasts and the latest episode of Democracy Now! In our ear, we're able to consume every extra minute of default mode network time if we so choose. This means that instead of tapping into our own creative potential, instead of giving our minds the downtime to do the undercover work of insight, we're setting our neocortex on an already programmed track of mass media. Culturally, we are at the point of needing to schedule daydreaming time. So you have to decide to build it in. If you know that life-changing transformation can come from within, then you have to make space for it to process and to manifest. It could be as simple as daydreaming during quiet time. In Miller's study, people reported that sudden insights while cleaning, showering, or just lying down happened regularly. Charles Darwin spent 2 hours lying down every night to solve those problems. But it can also help to get out of your normal routine. I have some of my clearest and most transformative insights when I travel. My brain gets out of its habitual track, and something about the quality of my attention shifts. I'm able to see and understand more clearly, and insights abound. Exercise also helps. Runners routinely report realizations during the semi-meditation of a long run, in which it's easier to shut off some of that thinking. For some, stream of consciousness journaling reveals new insights. In her book, The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron encourages writing morning pages every day in a stream of consciousness framework in order to see what is revealed. It also helps to engage with art. The beauty and the mystery and the emotion of art can unlock the subconscious back of the brain. A moving photograph or sculpture, or sometimes a piece of prose, just reaches in and grabs something that maybe your conscious mind wasn't aware of, and in a non-thinking way engages with something deeper in you. And then, once the movement starts, you have to just let it move. For some reason, our back brain doesn't particularly like a lot of pressure. It's like when you're trying to think of someone's name, you're trying to remember it really hard, and if you think too hard, you just can't get it. But if you back off and for 20 minutes just let it be, boom, it'll come right back up. That back brain, it works more slowly, but it doesn't want you to look directly at it while it's working. So it is with both hunches and gut feelings. They're signaling something important. But you need to find the delicate balance between saying, yes, this is important, let's continue to process it in the back brain, and shining a light on the front brain to the back brain so soon that it drives that hunch back into hiding. It's a tricky balance that you don't want to hide from it or ignore it, but you also don't want to scare it off. Parker Palmer talks about the delicate balance between inviting the soul to speak and scaring it off when he invites us into his famous soul sharing circles. In these circles, Palmer encourages us to create the quiet and inviting space where a person's true self, depth of soul, might feel safe to come forward and speak. In these types of sharing circles, people share transformative insights, often learning the information as they speak it aloud. B.B. Simon calls a similar insight-generating technology focusing. There are methods for doing this in groups, and there are also methods for doing it individually. There's technology that's been developed, sometimes recently, sometimes over hundreds of years, sometimes over millennia. It's about focusing without focusing. The way that you might let your eyes unfocus while looking at a stereogram, those optical illusion images that have hidden images inside of them. You sort of look at them, but not quite look at them. It's an art form, trying to quiet the mind and focus without thinking. The most ancient form and effective form of it is called meditation. You power down your neocortex and you breathe. And then you listen. Whatever you want to call it. Your back brain, your inner voice, God, your soul, the collective unconscious, your subconscious, that thing has insight to share with you. Your job is to make space for it to speak, and then your job is to listen to what it has to say. This is hard when the dream lands so hard that it flattens. Sometimes that thing that shows up is not what we wanted to hear. And we might need to take a moment to breathe, to wrestle with it, to try to learn how to love it as much as it loves you. In order for that insight that has shown up to be transformative in your life, you eventually have to take action to make it happen. When I finally heard the call to be a minister, I started making moves the next day. It took me 1.5 years to get to seminary, and it took me 7 years to be standing in front of you here now. But I took the first step on that long road immediately. So you can go at your own pace, and you only need to take one step at a time. But once you hear that insight, it's time to move. May it be so, and blessed be.